All right, welcome everybody to the first SIG-Azure community meeting, which I am extremely happy to be participating in and leading at this moment. So what I'd like to do is go through the meeting minutes and agenda document, which is bit.ly/sig-azure, if you want to retroactively look at that if you're watching this recording. This recording will be made available on YouTube under the or actually I think it's the Kubernetes umbrella in YouTube. So without further ado, I want to start with a little bit of introduction, and that is what this SIG is really trying to accomplish and to make sure that you're in the right place. And also after that, I want to take a moment and just have everybody just briefly introduce themselves and where they work. And if you have any specific thing that you'd like to see come out of the SIG. We have to be a little bit judicious with time because we have a big agenda and we only have about 26 minutes left. So from a organizational standpoint, I want to really clarify that this SIG is to discuss the evolution of Kubernetes running in Azure with a focus on Azure Container Service, which is emerging as one of the premier places to stand up and run Kubernetes in the ecosystems and also in Azure. So what we're not is we're not a place here to really hash out technical or operational or implementation issues. So it's great if people want to share things that we want to create an issue for, or maybe search for an issue if you don't know if there's one out there already for what you're experiencing. But we basically don't want to co-opt this time and everybody's valuable time for tactical issues, or we really want to focus on strategic issues. And if we could just run around real quick and have people introduce themselves, that would be great. I'll start with myself and then I'll hand it off. My name is Jason Singer-Dumars. I go by Jace. And I am one of the co-SIG leaders. And yeah, I work for Microsoft. We are part of the Deis acquisition. So I've only been at Microsoft for a reasonably short time. And super thrilled to be here and be part of this journey. So I'd like to hand it off to the Azure office in Boulder.
I'll go first. My name is Seth Goings. I'm a software engineering manager out in the ACS group. Also came from the Deis acquisition, as you can tell by the sweet colored squares that almost look like they're Microsoft approved, but they're not quite the right color.
So close.
Yeah, so I'm interested to see where this goes.
Matt Tucker, just software engineer here at the Azure Boulder office.
Chris Nova, Bang Bang.
Matt Boersma, software engineer with these guys, working on Azure stuff.
All right. Should we move on? Jake Quinta, is that right? Anybody else, feel free to introduce yourself. I see Rob Roddy. You're from Red Hat, right? Oh, I am striking out as an MC on introducing people. You're people.
Oh. Yeah, sorry. That's actually, last name is Raitai. Yeah, I'm from Red Hat. I'm didn't realize this was the inaugural Azure meetup, but just a couple of issues I wanted to bring to the attention of the SIG and get some involvement in.
Great, thanks.
Sylvain, I'm working for Nuance Communication, speech and AI company. We've been using Kubernetes for now over 2 years on-prem, and we're migrating to Azure. By the end of the year, we should have everything running in Azure. So really trying to keep the focus on and trying to align with the best practices and stay up to date.
Great, thanks. Anyone else want to step up and introduce?
Well, I'm always joining that company, and I'm definitely having a bigger background, but yeah, we're company for something like.
Amrit, having difficulty hearing you. Okay.
Maybe because of the,
I'll go then.
I
My name is Peter. I'm a developer at Microsoft in the TED organization, focusing on Azure Container Services, and open source on Linux. And that's me.
Great.
Hi, everybody. This is Michael from Aprenda. I'm the SIG lead for SIG Windows. So there's a lot of synergy between the two different SIGs. So I'll try to attend here as much as possible. Responsible for a wide variety of things around Kubernetes, including the SIG Windows I just mentioned, some of the Charismatic Enterprise Toolkit that Aprenda is delivering, and a few other features that will have folks in different SIGs across the board of the Kubernetes project.
Great. Thanks, Michael. Anyone else?
Hello, my name is Luis Pavon, and I work for CoreOS, and you may see me in many other SIGs.
Great. Thanks, Luis.
Hey everybody, Aaron Schlesinger. I work with the Azure Containers team, along with the Boulder office and Jason and others. Super excited to see where this SIG goes.
Thanks, Aaron.
Hey all, my name is Jason. I'm one of the other Jasons on the ACS team for Microsoft, also in PM.
Thanks, Jason.
Hi,
I'll
this
say
is
hi.
Wayno.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So this is Wayno. I'm from Microsoft Azure Container Service in Redmond office.
Great, thanks.
Jack, also with Microsoft, based in Portland. Excited to dive into ACS land.
Cool. Who else we got?
Cal here, Microsoft.
Hey, Cal. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm Brendan. I'm here working on Azure Container Service as well. And I figure with 20 minutes left, you want to call intros and we can move on.
Let's do it. All right. Moving right along. Let's dig into the agenda. Quick set of working agreements. This should be pretty straightforward. Respectful communication in all matters. So if you have a disagreement or you have a concern or something that you need to raise with another community member, even if it gets heated, please remember to be respectful and listen with an intent to understand as opposed to respond. Let's try and be solution focused as much as possible, especially because we're all learning and doing at the same time. So it's good to work together and find solutions and not really dive into being focused on problems. Diversity is a strength and not a weakness. So that comes in all forms. And so I want to make sure that as a SIG, we openly celebrate diversity of thought and as individuals. And lastly, when you're not speaking, please mute your microphone because that makes the facilitation process much, much easier. There's a demo slot here. I think what I'd like to do is come back to that if we have time, but there's a lot of other things I want to cover. And if you want to be on a future demo, please at the top, I'm going to put it in the agenda right now, put in a date and what you would like to do for your demo and who you are. And that will be great. I'd love to see a lot of demos. Some people are doing some really amazing things out in the community right now. So let's get some of those here amongst this group. So the next section is work in progress. And work in progress is really to talk about initiatives that we are going to be facing as a community. And this is really forward looking to right now it'd be version 1.8 and 1.9. In some cases, this will touch on the current release, but for the most part, this is future looking. And basically, it looks like there's a few things here. The first one is the cloud provider controller breakout for Azure. And this is a fairly big chunk of work, and that's because the current cloud provider implementation is officially deprecated. And the impetus is really to provide a pluggable instantiation of cloud providers as opposed to having it in core. And there's a lot of benefits to that. It does pose some really interesting challenges that we're going to run into in this process. I've put a link in here for Rancher's Cloud Controller Manager, and the developer who was doing this work, who is currently not with Rancher but working independently, is Siddhartha Mani. And Siddhartha's work really has driven the implementation details of this, but this is a community effort, and we need to make sure that we're very active in addressing our specific concerns and needs in the implementation details of this. And it also means that we're going to have to spin up our own cloud controller inside the Azure organization. It also allows us to prototype and test other approaches of the implementation, which are pretty cool. So the details are here. I don't necessarily want to go into all the history and back story behind all this, but what I would like to do is just open the floor for a moment, and if anybody has any specific details on this or ideas, concerns, questions, let's get those documented. Cool. All right, moving right along. The next major feature that we're going to be working on for 1.8 and beyond is Azure Managed Disks. There's some work that's already been done on this. And we basically have, a lot of this work too was done pre-SIG-Azure. So now that we have the ability to manage the code in the cloud provider, it's giving us a little more flexibility in terms of the rate of velocity on getting this done. So this work is being broken down into smaller stories at the moment, and right now the work is being handled inside of Microsoft by a team, and we are definitely going to be having some PRs for review soon. There is a PR linked below 47158, which is Brendan's PR, and I'll let him speak to that if he needs any help on that, but I wanted to raise awareness of that. And that is specifically the implementation of the mount details in Kubernetes itself. Any questions on that?
That PR actually, I think we're going to pull back because after I talked with Cal in Huamen from Red, it looks like it's probably not necessary, although there may be one flag that we want to set. I don't know. So we're still working on that a little bit.
Okay.
In separate but related news that may not be necessary anymore, given that we're breaking the cloud provider out, I got the update of the Azure SDK PR all green and ready to go. So once the window opens up after code freeze, that should go in. Although we may very immediately rip everything out in favor of the external cloud provider.
Right.
But it's there, so that adds API support in the SDK for managed disks.
Oh, okay, great.
So I mean, not the implementation, but just the API.
Okay.
And also was needed for cluster federation. So one thing I don't actually know if you were tracking, Jason, but I should have hooked you up with Christopher Shishko, something like that. Business CSA. Was doing cluster federation DNS work, Azure DNS support for Kubernetes cluster federation.
Okay.
PR for that. I don't know if you're tracking that already or not.
I am not. So Azure DNS support.
Yeah. So there's a DNS provider, and he was implementing that.
You broke up.
He was implementing a DNS provider for the cluster federation Kubernetes API server. In fact, I think he's done.
Okay, cool. Well, we'll look at that.
But the TLDR on the disk stuff is basically we want to take everything that Cal did in his PR and give it into the cloud provider as soon as we can.
Yes, absolutely.
That PR lingered for way too long.
Yeah, this hopefully the SIG will help call attention to those things. We can get these done faster, better.
Yeah, for sure. And the external cloud provider will help a lot too.
Great. So moving along to PRs, looks like 45540, almost palindromic. Who wanted to raise that as an issue? Who put that in there?
I did. So that goes around. So there have been a number of issues, especially with the kubelet not reporting its its node status and pod status to the API server and getting itself marked as not ready and pods vacated, and root cause, or at least initial potential causes, could be Azure API, or not just the Azure, but Azure API, but really the cloud provider APIs, whichever cloud provider it's in, because it's been seen in Azure, it's been seen in AWS and GCE, possibly going slow or being unresponsive, and causing a delay in a node, a kubelet update, and therefore causing the API server, the controller manager to mark it is not available. So there, the BZ that, the PR, I should say, that I have linked there, someone else had gone through and added some logging calls around some get Azure API calls. I was hoping to get some eyes on that and hopefully movement. And I would actually like to have that be expanded to be logging around all API calls. I've done that for, I've submitted PRs for Azure, or no, I'm sorry, for GCE and for AWS to do logging on all the calls, around all the API calls, with the idea being that it'll be at a high log level. And whenever we have an issue, like we're seeing with kubelet not reporting node status or something like that, we can have the people enable this high level of logging and get basically a printout of all the cloud provider calls, see if any of them are taking too long, or maybe we have you know, a bunch of calls that are overlapping or something, to try to help diagnose these kinds of problems. So really, I just wanted to kind of bring it up, see if anybody had any issues with it, if they agreed with it, and to try to get some eyes and movement on the PR that's already outstanding, that's done some of it.
So there is something already in play called Cloud Provider API Metrics. And it's implemented for basically all the providers except Azure. And we're going to be working on Azure for 1.8. And essentially it does all the things that you've got. It might be better to invest in actually the work associated with getting that cloud provider metrics for Azure in place, because there's already the implementation.
So I kind of looked at the metric stuff, and maybe I'm not fully familiar with it, but it did not look like the same type of a thing that I'm talking about. So it looked like it was a metric and says, hey, this API call is done. Whereas the logging and that PR for Azure and what I suggested for AWS and GCE is literally logging around the API calls. So that, you know, a log before, a log immediately after. So you know exactly how long the call itself took. Usually the metric stuff that I saw, you would see an API call, you do error checking, you know, play with the value, and then you do a metrics call to say this, you know, to do your metrics call. And that's not, it didn't seem to me as if it's the same level of kind of information that I was looking for, because that would hide whether or not a specific call took a very long time to do. All you'd know is that a call was done, but you don't know when it started and when it ended.
So the metrics API, or the metrics implementation, definitely does capture that.
It did? Okay.
Yeah. So what I'll do as a to-do item is I'll try and add to the supporting information to that, to the meeting minutes after the fact.
Sure.
And then we can just see if that's a better place to direct the effort, or if we want to move forward with the PRs that you've already got in place. Does that sound good?
Yeah. I don't. Yeah, if that's a better way to do it, because there's already some augmenting, that would be great. I just want to make sure. I think that having that kind of logging is very beneficial.
We should probably do both, honestly. Like, I mean, we should have aggregate statistics, but also something that I found very useful in the past is basically whenever a call goes longer than a certain time, kick out more detailed information, right? So you have the histogram that tells you like, hey, you know what, your 99th percentile latency is really bad. But then in the logs, you have specific information that tells you about the specific calls that went slow, so that you can actually debug them. Because the aggregate stats will tell you you have a problem, but they don't really help you debug like where and when the problem happened, which is, I think, kind of the analogy you're trying to get at.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. So I think it's definitely worth saying something like, hey, you know what, if the API call takes longer than, I don't know if we need to log the beginning and end of every single API call, but if you know, an API call takes longer than 5 seconds or something like that, we log as much as we can about that API call.
Cool. So that's something we should probably raise as an issue, or or track somewhere.
So just a matter of completeness, if you need someone to test or test out your PR, we're getting it maybe every 3 days with this issue on randomly between 10 to 20 nodes. They go down for 15 minutes. Kubelet just does stop responding. So we do see this quite often. So maybe if you need us to or me to try your new logging or try to investigate, this is on our side something that we track as a top priority right now, because we do lose all the pods on those nodes due to the liveliness probe that goes down. So
it would be great if that happens. It would be great if you could send us file an issue or just send directly to the group mailing list, or directly to me, like a subscription ID and a rough time frame, and then we can go and look you up in the API logs and see if we can figure out what the calls are.
Perfect, because I'll next time it happens, I'll let you know. What's your you prefer the
Why did you? Well, it depends on whether you want how you feel about putting your subscription ID into the SIG group. You can just send it directly to me,
Okay.
BURNS at Microsoft.
Okay.
Actually, can you make a request? Is that if you could put the results of the conversation publicly, it will help others. And
yeah, absolutely. We'll absolutely make it public. I just meant in terms of like giving us the specific details so that we can dig into our logs.
Sure.
Okay.
This is not something that's just happening in Azure. People have reported and seen it across other cloud providers too.
It's good to know.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Time check. We've got 5 minutes left. So we've got this last issue 46442, and then I just want to quickly go through the release updates.
So that one is me as well. That's another kind of informational. There's inconsistencies in cloud providers around what happens if a cloud provider node gets stopped. Most of the cloud providers end up with the node being deleted from Kubernetes. GCE is a notable exception in that it just marks the node as not ready. So that the issue that's linked there is one to start a discussion about how all the different cloud providers should handle stopped instances and what should constitute a new cloud provider node. So I just wanted to bring that up, get some eyeballs on it, and get people from the Azure space commenting and participating.
There is also the disk related to that. If that node goes with disk, what will happen?
Yeah, so that there is current issues with. I mean, there's issues with what it's currently implementing, and one of them is disk, right? If the node gets stopped and then it gets started again, it goes away from Kubernetes and gets started. It's all sorts of issues with persistent disks and and things like that. So there's a lot to kind of figure out. My kind of thought on that is a good place to start would be kind of come up with what are the kind of attributes of an instance that we say that if these attributes are the same, that this node is the same, and then you can then take, once you have that kind of attributes, you could apply it to each one of the individual cloud providers to say, when we do this action, all of these metrics or all these attributes stay the same, so therefore we should treat it as the same node.
Great. Fantastic. So if we could just take a look at that PR, that would be super great. So moving on to releases, 1.7.0 beta 2 is out today. I highly encourage you to run that, check it out, file any issues, because the more feedback we get on these beta releases, the better the overall release is going to be. And hopefully we don't have to do a rapid turnaround patch release as we did in the last release. So more eyes on that, the better. 1.6.5 has some really important Azure-related fixes in it that we've been able to cherry pick back in. Those are listed under the topic in the meeting notes. If you have any questions about those, definitely fire those off in the Slack channel, or if you have anything specific now, I'm happy to field any of those questions. All right. Lastly, anybody have any announcements? All right. Well, I appreciate everybody's time tremendously. This recording will be posted on YouTube, and I want to thank you all for taking the time to join the SIG, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chase.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thank
you. Bye.